So KSV, Kari Sarva Vishwavidyalaya, is a university established during the Gujarat State Act 21 of 2007 and was approved by UGC. The university has been set up by the Sarva Vidyalaya Kerala Mandal, which is a trust with more than 100 years of philanthropic existence to provide the need-based education and develop courses for contemporary relevance to be the University of Excellence by providing research and skill-based activities and training which would foster higher economic growth and provide the education to all irrespective of caste, creed, and religion, etc. Talking about Ldrp Institute of Technology and Research, it was established in 2005 and 2006. The college has made a steady progress during the past 16 years of its existence, and as a prestigious state institute, Ldrp ITR has long recognized its role in engineering, education, generation, and dissemination of useful and relevant technological, industrial, and economic development of the country. And now, KSV and Ldrp has brought to you this Break the Barrier event, which is a compilation of various interactive workshops from industry experts, working professionals, experienced developers, CEOs, and more, where you can present your revolutionary ideas and skill ups with a competitive environment presented by the hackathon to grab the opportunity to win excited prizes. And among these 14 plus workshops, today we'll be conducting our Getting Started with the Figma workshop. And on that note, I would like to introduce our today's presenter for the workshop, Mr. Luis Ouriach, a design advocate at Figma. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Mr. Louis. Good evening, Louis. Grateful to have you on board.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I can see there's still some people arriving. Shall I just get going as they're continuing to come?
Yeah. It would be better if we can wait for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. No problem. I'll share my screen anyway.
Yeah.
Whilst we are waiting for other people to arrive, if you could write in the chat your experience of Figma before, just so I can get some understanding of whether you're brand new, you're an expert, you could be running the session yourself. Let me know. Also, let me know when I should start. Okay, I can see there's lots of no's here. That's totally fine. First time, cool. All right, I might get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is introduce myself. But before I do that, I'm actually going to invite everybody into this file here. So I'm going to, if you can hear a baby screaming, I apologize, that's my neighbor. I'm going to invite all of you into this file, and that's going to show you one of the first things that you probably want to know about Figma is the collaborative or sharing capabilities of the platform itself. Everything is in the cloud. So regardless of whether you're on a Windows, a Mac, a Chromebook, using Chrome, Firefox, Edge browser, whatever, you can use Figma wherever is comfortable for you. So you can share any file as well by clicking this little blue icon at the top here. So if I click share, that will pop open this dialog for me on top. And I can invite basically all of you into this file. So I'm going to change the permissions here to anyone with the link can edit. I'm going to copy this and we're going to see what happens when all of you can come into this file and hang out in here together. Whilst you're all arriving, I'll introduce myself. My name is Luis Ouriach, an excellent pronunciation of that, by the way, in the introduction. Not many people can get it right, so thank you for that. I'm a designer advocate at Figma. I've been at Figma for 2 years and I'm always branded. So you can see here, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. I've got a Figma t-shirt underneath. I have a section of my wardrobe dedicated to basically my uniform of Figma. What I'm passionate about is things like design systems, components, organization, career growth, all that sort of stuff. So if you'd like to talk about any of that during this session, let me know. We can go wherever you want. We can talk about whatever you want today. I will do an introduction. I'll take you through some basic features, but this is an open session. You can ask as many questions as you want. I know there's quite a few people in the session, but I can take questions. That's totally fine. Don't be shy to ask those. Outside of Figma, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. So if you're interested in Twitter, you can find my handle here. You can hover on here and just click the links. So another feature that I'm introducing you there is the hyperlink feature. So within any text element in Figma, you can add a hyperlink to it, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Outside of Twitter, I also have a weekly newsletter and a podcast as well. I actually published a new episode on that podcast this week about design systems. So if you're interested to learn about that, go and check it out. So how do you add hyperlinks to text on the canvas? If I select any piece of text here, like this, selection, and you can see at the top menu, there's a little link icon. So I can click that link or use the keyboard shortcut, and I can then paste the link on there. So let's just say this is going to be going to figma.com, enter. You'll see the text then gets an underline on there, and if I hover on that, I can open up that link. So it's really useful if you want to build some presentations where you're linking out to external resources, or if you want to navigate around your file, you can do that too. So let's try that. I'm going to add something else in this design here, just a regular box here. We call these frames, and you can access that in the top menu. There's a little drop down next to the pointer. It says frame. If you've used other design tools, you might be used to calling this an artboard. We call them frames inside of Figma, and there's not many differences other than the terminology, but it's basically a container for your designs. So I've created this default frame on the canvas here, and if I want to use this as a link, I can do that. Any single thing inside of Figma has a link. So whether that's a text element, an image, a frame, a component, you can link directly to it. So if I right click on here, I could copy the link here, or in the share at the top right where I shared this file, go to share, and you'll see that at the bottom right of this section, it says link to selected frame. So when I copy this link, it'll then direct me straight here if I change the link from my original text. So let's go back and select something else, maybe this Figma label here, and just paste. That now adds that URL onto that text. And when I hover on this, it says go to frame. So if I click this, it will take me directly down to that frame on the canvas itself. I don't leave the platform. So if you start thinking a little bit outside of the box there, you can start to jump around the canvas to navigate people throughout your document using those links if you wanted to. If you wanted to link somebody specifically to a piece of work, for example, a design or something like that, you could also do the same thing. So you could select your frame, copy that link, send to your colleague or your friend, and they could then land directly on that area that you want them to see. Okay, that's enough about links. Let's jump on to the rest. So first thing I think is really important is to understand the structure inside of Figma. If you're used to other design tools, Photoshop, Sketch, or something like that, you're probably used to storing your files locally on your computer. As I mentioned before, Sketch is in the cloud, so you don't necessarily need to think about where files are stored because they're always online and everywhere. With that in mind, we want to think about what that structure looks like, and this is what your structure is going to look like when you're starting to think about your designs throughout this project. I've now jumped to the second page in this file. You can create as many pages as you need to. There's a little plus icon on the pages list there, and that allows you to structure your file a lot more effectively. So within that structure idea, at the top we have a team. So a team is basically a collection of users. So all of us could be on one team if that made sense for us. Within those teams, you get projects, and they're effectively folders, and they're really simple ways to structure your designs. And in those folders or projects, we get files. And you can create as many projects and as many files as you need. It really depends how you want to structure your work. I might just pop open a new Figma window here and show you how I've structured my personal account, just to show you how I'm doing that. So you can see here, I've got this 8px team, and that's my collection for all my projects. That's where I hang out on my freelance work and that kind of thing. Inside of there, I've got all these projects, and that's how I'm breaking down the work. So I basically create a different one per client, something like that. Then inside of those projects, I have my files. So let's go to this community files project. You can then see loads of different Figma files that I've created and collected inside of that project. So that's how the structure works. Hopefully that made some sense as you start to jump in. Next, we're actually going to start playing around. So we're going to jump and start thinking about vectors. So I'm going to open up this next page here, and we're going to create some very simple icons. So as an example, a minus icon, a plus icon, something that you probably use in something like an accordion. So I've got some examples in here, but I will just actually recreate these live just to show you how I would typically go about this. So what I'm going to do first is select the rectangle, and that is accessed in the top menu here. You see we've got all these different shapes here. You can also just press R on your keyboard to access the rectangle. And you can just drag this free form on the canvas if you want. If you hold Shift, that constrains those proportions to keep them the same. But I want this to be a bit more free form, so I'm just going to draw this shape here and zoom in on the canvas. I'm using a Mac, so I'm holding Command and scrolling on my mouse here. If you're on a Windows, you can just press Control. If you're using a trackpad, you can just pinch to zoom on the canvas there. Or you can use the traditional zoom by pressing Z or Z on your keyboard and highlighting something on the canvas there. Now I've got that rectangle selected. On the top right, you can see I've got my properties here. I've got W for width and H for height here. So I'm going to change that width to be 8, change the height to be 40. So we've got a rectangle there that I can now start to play around with. Now I've got this selected, I'm going to actually rename this to be something more generic. At the moment, it's called Rectangle 1. So I'm just going to double click onto that layer and call that Shape. So now I've got my shape, let's give it a color. And we have the color fill settings on the right hand side. Drop this down and just change that to black. So I've got a rectangle, it's sized appropriately, whoops, and I've basically now got an icon in effect. I just need to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to change the border radius of this. And as I hover on this rectangle, you'll notice in each corner we get these little handles for radius. And if I pull those in, you can see it's pulling that radius in and out as I change that, or as I drag that handle there. Or I can use the right option up here. There's a little corner radius slider. I can drag this around if I want to, or type in a number. So I'm just going to type this to 100 just to make sure it's really properly rounded on the edges. Okay, so I have my one shape that I now have as this minus. Let's now duplicate this to create the plus, and then I'll rotate them afterwards. So to duplicate on my Mac, I hold Option and drag. On your Windows, Alt and drag creates a copy of that, so you can start to play around with those. I'm now going to duplicate this shape again. So I'm going to press Command and D. And you see that actually jumps over to the right hand side, Control and D if you're on a Windows. And I'm going to rotate this one. So on the edges here, I can just hover over, rotate it freely, or hold Shift to constrain that rotation around if I want to. I can now align this on top of the other one and snap that into place. You can see the red handles. We've now got a plus. Select the original one, rotate that around 90 degrees. So I've now got my minus. Now, because we have these rotations in there, I actually want to reset those. So I'm going to right click here and press flatten. That basically takes out all the other settings and turns it into a simple vector shape. Same for these, I'll select both of them, right click and flatten. So I've now got a minus and a plus icon created really quickly. What I'm then going to do is turn these into components. So components are effectively the building blocks of any system that we decide to make, and it allows you to use one thing in many places. So I'll select both of them, drop the menu down at the top, and create multiple components. So I've now got this one shape here, I'll call this minus, and this other one, I'll call this plus. So I've now got two components. Option or Alt and drag again to create an instance of those. And you'll see these are now referencing the first one. In the layers panel, you'll see I've got this minus, which is this top one, which is the main component. And it has that 4 diamond icon. Then I have the instance of this one with just a single diamond there. If I make any changes to the main component, for example, changing the color, you'll see that now propagates down to both of those. The same with the plus one. If I change the color here, you can see that is also changing in the instance as well. So that's the benefit of components when we start to think about things like icons, but also across our designs as well. I might come back to this icons with variants if we have time at the end. Next up is selection colors. So here I've got sample illustrations and also a design screen. And I want to show you how easy it is to batch replace colors in something if you want to make changes at batch. So I've got this developer, product manager, and designer illustration here. I'm actually going to select them all and option and drag down to create a copy. and then press Command and D a few times just to make sure I've got a bunch of the same ones. If I select one of them, so this developer here, this is a containing frame. You can see the layers inside of here, all those vector shapes inside that illustration. I'll collapse this down. On the right hand side, you'll notice at the bottom of this panel it says selection colors. So we've got some styles that have been applied here. We've got a brand accent, we have a gray 100 stroke, green 200. I mean, if I uncollapse all of this, you can see we've also got some raw hex values in here. So let's take this blue and change this. As I change it, you can see that person's tie is actually changing color now. So if we put this into theory, I'm going to undo this and select all of them like this. I can now change the colors for everything from this one panel. So if I go back to that blue and make that maybe a red, you can see that person's tie has been changed across all those different places. So selection colors can allow you to do this a lot faster. I'm actually going to detach this style here. I think that is the hair color. Maybe change the color of this. You can see that hair and eyebrows is being changed across all of them. Let's maybe make this black. So you've now got black hair across all those different places. Select another one and change the color there. Maybe select this skirt color here. You can see that's changing now across all of them. So if you want to make those changes across lots of different places, selection colors is going to be really useful. If I select a real world design, like this screen here, I can do the same thing as well. So here I've got this red color here for this warning banner at the top. If I want to make that a little bit darker, I can select that like so. Again, if I undo this and create a copy of this screen and select both of them, I can make those changes from one place and it will propagate across all of them. So test out selection colors. It should make your lives a lot easier when you're making changes to your designs. Next thing is tidying up an organization on the canvas. So there's a page down there. You'll see here I've got a few different shades of colors here as frames, but they're not quite organized in a way that I would like. So if you find yourself in a situation, you can select all of those frames or shapes or anything, and you'll see when I zoom in at the bottom right here, an icon pops up for tidying up. So if I select this icon, it now organizes them on the canvas in a straightforward way with spacing between them. I can manage this spacing by dragging these pink handles like so to tighten them up or make them larger, like so. Let's go down to 24 here, or I can use the panel on the right hand side to be a bit more pixel perfect with that. So let's say we wanted both of them to be 24. We've now got both of them set up like so. Another example is where you've got designs. So I've got a few different designs here and I want to tidy those up. Let's just actually make a few more of these like this. There's a plugin that I'd recommend you install called Organizer. I'm going to just actually copy this link here and paste it into the chat so you can have that open for later. And what this plugin allows you to do is set up that structure that organization that I just showed you, but in a much more high fidelity way. So if I select all of these, right click, plugins, oh, it doesn't look like I have it installed. Oh, hang on, here we go, Organizer, there we go. Install plugins, Organizer. This will pop open a window and I can then change the settings here. So I'm going to set the horizontal spacing to be 240. You can see that's updating live, and the vertical spacing to be 480. So I've now organized those frames in a really nice way, vertical and horizontal, using that plugin. And at the moment, the order of those layers is in the reverse order. So I'm actually going to select reverse sort order here and organize those frames. So I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that plugin should be really useful if you want to organize lots of things in a large scale way. Cool. The next thing is grids and constraints. So grids are quite central to a lot of designers' workflows, and I want to show you how you can set them up inside of Figma. So let's just create one first, and then I'll show you this option at the top here. I'm going to drag a frame to the canvas, so F on my keyboard for that artboard or frame. And you'll see on the right-hand side, we have these presets that I can use as well. So I'm going to select iPhone 13 mini, just drag this down here and zoom in. From here, I can add a grid if I want to. So on the right-hand properties panel, you see layout grid. I can click the plus icon, and that firstly gives me a grid of 10 pixels. If I want the grid to be pixel based, I can use that. So if we want 30 pixel, 20 pixel, 10 pixel grid, something like this, you can do that. Or I can use columns and rows. So traditionally, you probably have a column based grid. So select columns. Let's maybe make this 6 columns like so. Set the margin to be 12 and the gutter to be 24. So you've now got a grid added to our design, and that's all you need to do really. However, you could actually set this up as a style. So if I pop this 4 dot icon downs for style, click the plus icon here. I'm going to write 6 col grid, create the style. So now this frame has the 6 column grid saved on it. If I drag a random size to the canvas, hover over the layout grid, the 4 dots, I've now got 6 col grids saved here, and I can apply this to that frame. If I make that larger and smaller, you can see the 6 column grid is shrinking and growing. What I can also do is drop this inside my other frame and have grids inside of grids. So let me just add a slightly different color, background color to this one, and a stroke. So now what I've got is a grid that is aligned to a grid. Let me just make this one aligned here with a frame inside, which also has a grid. And I could do the same thing again. So if I select F again, drag this one inside, apply the grid, I've got a grid inside of a grid inside of a grid. Although that might sound trivial and not a real world example, something like icon design or illustrations or really pixel perfect designs is a really good example of why you might want grids inside of grids. Back to this example at the top, I have some content inside this grid frame here. And as I make that wider, you can see that the content isn't actually snapping to those grid handles there. So what I'm going to do is undo this and select all the content on the inside. A really nice keyboard shortcut to select something inside is to press Enter. As I press Enter, it selects everything inside. If I press Shift and Enter, it goes backwards. So Enter in, Shift Enter out. It's a really quick way to get into the muscle memory of drilling in and drilling out of your layers. So now I've selected all these 3 cards here. Let's take a look at this constraints panel on the right hand side. By default, this is left and top. So it sticks to the left, it sticks to the top. But what we actually want it to do is to stick to those grid elements. So I'm going to drop the left down and change that to left and right for all of them. Now go back to the parent. And as I drag it, you see the content is actually sticking to those grids. So it allows you to be a lot more flexible and a lot more scalable with your designs as you're making those using those grids. If you wanted to add another grid, so let's go 3 columns and 3 rows, like so, and then select my content and put them in the middle here, and then maybe make them a little bit larger so they stuck to this here. I can also do top and bottom. So left and right, top and bottom. Now when I make this larger and smaller, you can see that content is actually sticking to those constraints that I've applied on that grid. So a really quick way to get those things up and running. Okay, let's level up the complexity slightly and start talking about style creation. So we spoke earlier about colors and color management inside that selection colors panel. But what happens if you want to create your own styles to use somewhere else? As you'll see here, I've got some examples of color. You see I've got a white and then some gray swatches that I've created on the canvas. Underneath there, you'll see that I've got the same things, but they have a name. So gray 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And I'm going to delete these and then recreate them myself. So the first thing I'm going to do is to use the Figma's batch rename here. So I'm going to drag a box over all of these, press Command or Control and R. That pops up my rename panel. And what I'm going to do is type in mono slash. You can see I've got number here. So number 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. Rename. You see I've got that actually backwards. So if we can undo this one, rename mono slash number down. That goes from 5 down to 1. Rename. So I've now got my mono 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Done really quickly. It didn't have to go and double click to every layer. It's just allowed me to do that using that batch rename feature. If I now select my shape, go to my fill settings on the right hand side, click the style icon again and click plus. I can now type in here mono slash 01. Select this one. Oops. Style plus mono slash 02. Style plus mono slash 03. Style plus mono/04, and finally style plus mono/05. If I now add any frame to the canvas, in my styles panel on the right, I can get all those mono colors to select from and start to use them in my designs. As you're probably thinking, this is not the most efficient way to create all those styles that we have. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is actually install this plugin here called Styler. So I'm going to edit this text here, copy that link and paste this into the chat as well. And what this allows you to do is to do that without the manual side. So underneath, you can see I've got all these colors that I've set up: red, yellow, blue, and green, with a 100, 200, and 300 variation. Select them all, right click, plugins, install plugins, styler, generate. What this will then do is look through all those layer names and create a style for me. So generate styles. You can see at the bottom it says created 24. Now, when I select a frame on the canvas, go to my style panel, you can see I've got all my mono, my greens, my blues, yellows, reds, etc. So select this red, go back, select the yellow, go back, select the blue. So that's a really nice way to batch create those styles rather than doing it manually by naming, selecting the style panel and clicking the plus. So check out that plugin, it's really, really useful. Another example is by using it on typography. So you see here I've got some headings, and I have some body, and all of these inside have this heading large, medium, small. So I'm going to select this one here, rename this to be, so Command and R to rename, or Control, heading / large. Select the next one, rename heading / medium. Select the next one, heading / small. So now if I Command or Control and click with Shift on all of these text elements, right click, plugins, install plugins, styler, generate, it now has created 3 text styles for me. So if I press T on my keyboard for text and say hello, I can now go to my style panel for text and select any of those headings that I just created. So it's a really quick way to set those up as well. Same as before, if you wanted to do it manually, you definitely could. So this body regular, if I select the text here, go to my style plus body / regular, select this, maybe select this one, so body / small, body / small, and then select my text again. I can select heading or body text from here. So you can do it in the manual way, or you can use the plugin, whichever way works best for you. Okay, the next thing is simple prototyping. But before that, you probably all noticed that I'm using a dark mode of Figma here. If you want to use dark mode or light mode, that's totally fine for you. In the top left of the file, you can see there's a Figma icon. There's a quick actions panel here. In here, you can search for many different things, one of those being light or dark mode. So if I search light in here, you can see it says use light mode. That will then swap all my panels to be the light mode version. So if you prefer dark, if you prefer light, you can pop open that panel and use those from there. Okay, simple prototyping. So we have something set up already, and I'll basically just run you through how this has been structured. So I'm going to select this My Drinks frame here and press the play icon in the top right to open up the present mode or the prototyping mode. Click the play here, and this loads up our prototype. You'll see I've now got a frame selected on the canvas in my prototype viewer, and within here I can scroll up and down in there. I can also scroll horizontally inside each of these little rows there. So I'm going to show you how we set that one up. Back to my design file. If I select that top level frame again and go inside, so I press enter to go into those layers, you see we have a frame here called cocktails. In the prototype tab on the top right hand side, you'll see it says overflow scrolling, vertical scrolling. So what that allows me to do is have content that is larger than this frame, and I can then scroll within it. If I head back to the design tab here, you'll notice there's a clip content checkbox. If I uncheck this, you can see we've got all those cocktails now being shown. If I check it, they're now being shown and hidden. So it's a really nice way to show and hide things, which then allows you to have scrolling. If I set something up from scratch now, so iPhone design, Let's just add some rectangles in here. Create a copy of that. Command and D to duplicate that a few times. You can now see when I select this, clipped content is on. However, if I uncheck that, I've got those rectangles now being shown inside. I might just change the color of these to be darker. There we go. So I've now got this clip content. If I show it and hide it, you can see what happens. Go back to my prototype view, my overflow scrolling view, select vertical scrolling. Now select this frame again, click the play icon, and that'll allow me to scroll inside of here when I go to present mode. So it's a really quick way to allow you to have that scrolling there. The same thing has happened with each of those rows. So if I double click in here, you can see I've got a layer called cocktail row, and inside of there, I've got all those cocktails. If I go to design, go to my row settings here, you can see, let me just pull this out a little bit so you can see down here. So if I double click in, you can see this blue selection panel is actually outside of the main frame, which allows me to have that horizontal scrolling there. The next thing we want to think about is this navigation between all of these different screens. So you'll see at the bottom, we have this Navbar, which is actually a component as well. What you'd normally do inside of a design is basically select each element inside this menu, double clicking in, go to the prototype tab. A quick keyboard shortcut to jump to the prototype tab is Shift and E, which is a really nice way to jump between design and prototype. I can see this already has a connection, so I'm going to delete this. We then get these little handles that pop up on each element that we selected. And you can just drag this to any of those other frames that you want to navigate to. So this one should probably go back to itself because it's the My Recipes page. Select the Explore one. You can see we've got a setting on here as well. I might just clear this out, drag this over here to go to the next design. And then the last one is the account. You can see that is already navigating there. I'm actually going to go and delete these because it's not necessarily the most scalable way to set up our connections, and just make sure we've got all these other ones deleted too. What we can actually do here is make use of a component. So I've got this Navbar component here. And if I double click in there and then drag this out here from the bottom to this one, and then to this one, we've actually set up the connection from the main component itself. I just noticed we've got an issue here. We've got a duplication of connections. So I'm just going to select that, remove it, and add that back there. Now I can go and delete these inside or select them and add that component in. So let's delete this one, select the component, copy, and then select the frame and paste. And then we can align this to the bottom like so. Now you'll see when I've got that selected, it's already got those connections set up. So we've got the connection set at the component for each individual design. Then when I select each individual component inside the frame, it already inherits all those connections. So if you have 100 different designs, you can basically supercharge the menu generation and prototype connections from this one place. Instead of having to go into every single design, hook those up manually, it's already done for you. So if you want to build something like a menu, think about components as you're setting up those connections. Cool. The next thing is auto layout. So this is a tricky concept to grasp if you're brand new to it, but I'll show you how it works anyway. So let's go and create something like a simple input field. If I select some text, T, start typing, let's just type placeholder here. You'll also see I've got some examples already set up for you here so you can copy those. I've got some text on the canvas, and I'm going to add a frame to this. So I'll press F and just drag that around it. So we've now got a placeholder text inside this frame here. I'm going to head back to the design tab. On the right hand side, you can see it says auto layout. There's a plus icon. If I don't do this, I'll show you the comparison. So I'll create a copy of this. And on the second one, I'm going to add auto layout. You'll notice that alignment just jumped a little bit. So I'll just undo, add auto layout again. You can see it's jumped. That's because the spacing has now been consolidated. So we've got these handles on the right hand side here for the spacing around here. And I can manually change the spacing of this if I wanted to, or I can manage it on the right hand side in the auto layout panel. So by default, we have this aligned to the top left. I'm going to change this to the center actually. I'm going to then change the horizontal padding to be 24 and the vertical padding to be 12. So you can now see we've got a consistent alignment on each individual side of this frame. Let's add some border radius to make this a bit more interesting. Maybe a style from our panel. A stroke here. Maybe not mono 2, maybe mono 5. I'll select the text and make that white. Cool. So we've got a simple frame now with auto layout applied. The first one, if I add this, I'll select this text, copy it and paste it. You can now see we've got a bit of a problem where the text is much wider than that frame and the frame isn't adjusting its spacing. If I select frame 2 and double click into here and copy and paste, you can see that frame is actually now growing with the content that it has inside. So that's the first benefit of auto layout, is that it allows you to build more flexible containers for your content. Let's just type placeholder back here. What you can then do is start to think about chaining these things together. So if I take another copy of this and create maybe a couple more, I've now got 3 elements which I can add auto layout to as well. So if I select a frame and drag that around again, I've now got a container for all of my content inside, and I can add auto layout to this. So I click the plus, you see the spacing adjusted there again, and I can choose this as well if I want to, or type it in manually in this panel here. So let's just choose 16. So I've now got 3 elements on the inside, and they're spaced by 16, and I can choose the horizontal and vertical spacing of this main container as well. If I want them to be exactly the same, I can command or control and click inside this frame, this input field, sorry, and select the top, right, bottom, and left, or just type one number, so 24. That now adjusts to all of those sides. If I make this larger, you can see not much is happening here. So I'm going to undo this, press enter again to select those contents on the inside. And on the right hand side at the top, you can see we've got hug and hug. And the first one is the horizontal resizing. So this basically says what happens to this frame. Does it adjust to the content on the inside, or is it a fixed width, or does it basically fill the space around it? So I'm going to reset those to fill container. So I select their container, and you now see they're stretching as I make that larger. So this might be really useful as you start to think about designs that maybe need to go across a few different sizes, mobile, tablet, that kind of thing, is that you use that fill container setting to manage it. I can have these independent though, if I want to. So let's select the middle one, flip this back to hug. You can now see as I make this wider, it's just the top and the bottom one that is actually hugging that side. This one remains fixed. Additionally, I can choose which direction I want on here. So at the moment we've got vertical. If I swap that to be horizontal, you can see they've now all flipped to be horizontal. Or vertical, back to horizontal. You can see we're actually growing this shape massively. So we've got a few options about how we arrange things in there as well. I'm actually going to select these two and set those to be hug contents again and hug contents again. If I want them to fill the space vertically, it's the same principle. So let's select the middle one here, go over to my hug content settings for vertical, fill the container. Now when I make this larger, you can see that's actually sticking there. This is a good example of something like a sidebar. So if you're designing a website, you have a sidebar, you have a main container, and they might be sticking or not to the contents. Once I've selected something on the inside as well, I can use my arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge that around. So I can choose which position I want that to be, left, right, etc. So auto layout has all these different flexible options for you to build these layouts and these pieces of content in a really quick way. We could talk about auto layout for hours, but I did want to introduce you to it as we start to get involved in that sort of thing. I do have another example underneath of a form. This is a component, so I'm actually going to create a copy of this or an instance, just dragging this out here. And when I select those contents on the inside, you can see we've got a certain arrangement of the frames in here. So I'll run you through this. This might seem a little bit high level, but I'll run you through them anyway. I'm going to enter into all of this content. So I've got my form on the outside. On the inside, I have a group with an auto layout as well for my input fields. You can see the outside of those here. Then I have another frame wrapping my buttons there. So within a frame, you can have as many nested frames as you need to structure that work. And the reason I have these buttons inside their own frame is because I can have a horizontal direction, but the input fields above can have a vertical direction. So you get some flexibility, some control, but what you may end up needing is just more frames to nest those things into a much deeper level. Hopefully that helped. I think I saw a hand waved, but it looks like that's been put down now, so I'll continue. Okay, The next thing is about components again. So this is, again, you might not necessarily get into the rhythm of components, but I do want to introduce them to you anyway. And we have a certain component type called variants. Before I get to variants, I want to show you how to make a simple component. So let's take another example and just say hello and wrap this inside a frame, add our auto layout again, and add some color here. Let's go for this green 100 and a stroke. I'm going to double click on the canvas to rename this and just call this component here. To turn something into a component, you can do it at the top menu here, create component. You can right click, you can go to create component here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, which I do all the time. Once you build that muscle memory, it's really nice. So turn that into a component. You'll now see that has changed its presentation. It's now purple. And then when I drag an instance of this out, holding Option or Alt, if you're on Windows, same thing as before. If I change anything from the main component, that will then change across both of those places. What we might want to do though, is have one component which has a few different states. And what I mean by that, for example, is something like this, and then a version of that with a hover on it. So let's create a copy of this. So I've got hello again. Let's wrap this in a frame, add auto layout. Let's just make the spacing consistent on both of these. So 32 on the left and right, 16 at the top. So let's do 32 and 16. Add this fill here, add the stroke, and then I'm going to add an effect. So in the bottom of that panel, we've got effects here. Click the plus. You can now see we've got a nice shadow that has appeared on this, and I might make it a bit more aggressive so we can all see we've now got this really loud shadow on there. Double click here, component, and turn this into a component too. So now we've basically got two of the same thing, one with a shadow and one without. If I select both of them, you'll see on the right hand side it says combine as variants. So let's take a look at the layers panel here. We have two components, both called the same thing. Combine them as a variant on the right. They now get collapsed into one component called component, and inside we get two of these defaults. So now we can go and change the properties of this. So on the right hand side, we've got properties. You'll see it says we have a conflict here. So where it says property 1, I'm going to double click here, type state, select the first one inside, change this to, let's just leave it as default now. Select the second one and change that to hover. So now when I select my component here, you see there's no issues, there's no errors. We just have a state and we have two different versions of that, default and hover. If I select my component, hold Option or Alt on Windows and drag that instance out, you can now see we've got an instance on the canvas and the layers. On the right hand side, my component is being selected. I have a state default. If I drop this down, we now have the hover option here. So I can toggle between these different states from here. If I select that top level component again, you can see there's a little plus icon that appears here. It says add variant. So I'll click the plus. It adds a new variant to the canvas. I'm going to change the state here to focus. And then on this stroke here, I'm going to make that much larger. Now when I select my component, I get state, hover, default, and focus. So I can now toggle between all of those. Another thing you might want to do is have something like we have over here, where we have a toggle. So if I select this component and drag an instance out, you'll see here I've got a question mark, icon, question, and a little toggle. If I toggle this on, you can see the icon now appears inside of here. So let's do that really quickly. I'll select my component. I'm actually going to drag this a lot much larger here. And on the right hand side, we currently have one option of state. If I click the plus icon, create a new variant property, I'm going to say icon question mark. The default value I'm going to say is no. So when I select my components inside, you've got state default icon no, state hover icon no, state focus icon no. Now if I select these three and Option or Alt and drag, I create copies of those inside my variant. And I'm going to type yes inside icon. So now I go state default icon yes, state hover icon yes, state focus icon yes. Let's double click into this purple icon here and just copy it. And then select all three and paste. So I now get all three of them inheriting that icon. when I go down to my component underneath, my instance, I get the icon toggle. I can toggle that on and off across all 3 different states. So as you can probably predict, this is going to allow us to build much more flexible, efficient, scalable components as we start to use Figma. As you'll notice here, these are a little bit tight, so I'm going to select them and actually space them out a bit more. So select all of them, use that tidy up feature from before, and change the spacing to be 24 and 24. Selecting my parent component here, you'll see that it's actually hanging on the outside. So we've got this option in the top right-hand side to resize to fit. That now resizes to fit all those inside, and my component is still working really nicely. Okay, one last thing, and then we've got plenty of time for questions as well. So the next thing we want to start to do with our components is make them interactive. This is where we start to bring back the prototyping idea and the component idea and the variants idea into one place. So I'll show you first, and then I'll show you how it's built. I have a switch and an input field over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to drag and pull these instances into my frame, select my frame, and click the play icon. When in prototype mode, if you just click anywhere on the canvas, you'll notice that they've got this blue outlines or blue activity statuses on there, which means these are things that you can click. So if I click this toggle here, you can now see I've got this toggle interacting really nicely on the canvas. And my input field, I've got this placeholder text being shifted up and down, effectively creating what we call a float label inside that design. So back here, how have we done it? So we've got 2 components using a variant that I showed you before. So I've got my switch here, and I've actually noticed an error here. So on the right-hand side, you've got properties. Currently it just says property 1. So I'm going to double click in here and type state. If I create an instance of this component here, you'll see we've got that state and the toggle like this. The way we can create those toggles is by using off and on for each of our states, yes and no, or true and false. So that's just a quick way to remember if you want to have that toggle on, off, yes, no, true and false. So within here, we've got the off and on. If I go to the prototype tab, Shift and E, you can see there's 2 connections in here. I might just move them down a bit so you can see where those arrows are going. Cool. So you've got this one here. On click, we want to change it to the state that's on. This one, on click, change it to the state that's off. And the reason it has that blending, you can see it's actually transitioning the color, the position, and the size, if we have a different size, is because we're using this smart animate here. So that is Figma's way of saying, in the prototype, is there something that changes color? Yes or no? Is there something that changes position? Yes or no? And is there something that changes size? Yes or no? If the answer to any of those things is yes, we'll actually blend those shapes together. So that's how we're building those toggle switches. We have our component. Inside our component, we're creating those connections. And same for this input. If I enter in and maybe just drag this down again so you can see. You can see we've got two click connections. On click, change to. On click, change to. And I might just create another page here called Smart Animate very quickly just to show you how it does actually work live. So I'll press F for frame, iPhone shape again, draw a rectangle here, and then duplicate this, Command D. Select my rectangle, change the border radius, move it down, and also change the color here. If I then select each shape, Shift and E to prototype, drag that over. I'll keep these settings as default for now, currently set to instant. Select the second one, drag that back. So we've now got a back and forward connection. On my prototype now, I get this flow. I can double click in here to change the name if I want. So let's just call this Smart Animate and press play to launch it. So now I'm going to have a very simple shape on the canvas, which I can click and jump between those. Simple, not very interesting. So let's go back and select both of these shapes. And now I can change the connection type for both of them when I've got them selected. So I'll change it from instant to Smart Animate. Because they're both called Rectangle 1, Figma matches those layer names and says, okay, let's blend the shapes together. So back here, click, and you can see that's now blending that shape a lot more smoothly and a much more, in a much nicer way. What we can also do here is make it automatically do that, or have it looping around. So I'm going to select each connection and delete it. and then select the top one, the top level frame, and drag this handle over here and change it from on tap to after delay. Same with this one. Drag back, after delay. So now I can take my hands off the mouse and it just loops itself around. So if you wanted to build anything like a loader or an introduction screen or an animated GIF style thing, you could do it using the after delay function. Okay, I've been talking for a long time and I want to make sure I answer any questions. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat and I will answer them to the best of my ability. In the meantime, whilst those questions are coming in, just a few more things that I wanted to show you. So every Figma file has a version history. If you drop the menu down at the top here, you can see it says show version history. And that will show me everything that has happened today. So you can see some people's names in here who've made edits as well. It auto saves everything that's happening. Or if you want to do something like an official release of your design, you can click the plus icon here. Let's just say 30th of June workshop and say testing Figma out. Save. So now that bundles all of today's work into that name. So if you want to make a bit more efficient releases of your designs or something to go back to, you can use that little plus icon if you need to. I can then right click on this, copy the link to send to somebody. I could duplicate it as a new file, or if I made a mistake currently, I can restore and go back to that version. Just seeing the question here. Can we have a look at the plugins you have? Yes. So I don't use that many, but I'll show you a few that I do have installed. So right click plugins. So there's that styler one that I showed you before to generate the styles. Organizer, I use it every day to organize my frames. Content reel is quite nice. So I'll show you this one very quickly. Let's just add some text, placeholder here. Let's add a frame and basically design kind of like an image card. So on my fill settings, select the swatch, change that to image. Select both of these. Let's add some auto layout here. Shift and A. Add some padding. Add a background color. Add the stroke here. Cool. So we've now got a very basic thing going on here. I'm going to double click this, rename that to be card, turn it into a component, and now create a few instances. So I've got 3 instances of this component. If I select this shape here, right click, plugins, unsplash. This is a free image website that I'd recommend you all check out. Excuse me. I can then insert images into that as a fill. So let's select nature here. It now fills all of those with that nature card. If I want these to be different, Command, Shift, and click on all of them. Select plant. That will then fill them all with 3 different plants. So that is a really, really quick way to fill your content with the images from a royalty-free website, Unsplash. Content Reel, another one that I mentioned, open this up, is one that was built by Microsoft, and that allows you to insert content into your designs. So let's select this text here and fill this with the date. So you can see that that's now being filled with the date automatically. Or alternatively, if I hold Command or Control and just select all these like so, I can do that again, and it'll fill them with random dates, or random names, or random addresses, or random phone numbers, or anything like that. So it's, again, a really quick way to insert dummy content into your design. So check out the Unsplash one, check out the Content Reel one, check out Styler, check out Organizer, and I'll show you one more as well. So there is a cool thing here. It's called Skew Dat. It's quite a funny name. So if I select this here, and pull this open, because I had this as a component here. I'll open that up again. Cool. This allows me to add perspective to my designs. So what we'll now do is change this design like so. You can see like this. I'm going to actually select an instance and do it. So like this, and skew that. If I now change anything in my parent component, you'll see that's also being replicated in that instance. So that's another benefit of using components, is that you can have these things propagate down to your instances. So skew, if you want to skew your work, it's a really cool one. And lastly, another more practical one is status annotations. So select this here. This allows me to basically say what the status is of my designs. So if I select one of these frames, add in progress here, select this one, say approved. You can now then see at a glance what the status is of those designs. Maybe I'll just show you one more as well. So the last one I'll show you is a contrast plugin. So I'm going to jump back to this page here, open up contrast. It's just called contrast, it's a simple name. And select anything on the canvas. So let's select this text. You can now see I'm getting a contrast ratio on all my designs, and it's actually pretty good. However, if I select this icon, I'm sure, yeah, it's going to fail. So that tells me I need to change the contrast of my design. I can do that live. So let's open up the fill settings here. Maybe make that a bit darker. You can see as I drag it, it goes from fail, fail, fail to AAA. So I now know this is the minimum contrast ratio that I need on my designs to make sure it's more accessible. So there's a few plugins. Hopefully that helped. Got a question here. Is there any way by which I can crop a particular portion of a frame and export it? So when you select anything, excuse me, you can export it. So if I select this frame here, go to export in the bottom right, plus I can then preview my, this is not a very good example. Let's add that here. You can now see I've got my preview of my export here. If I just want to export a certain thing, I can add another frame. So if I do this, if I select my, let me just collapse these down. I can select that frame and move it inside there if I wanted to. And you can use that clip content thing again if you want, and export this. You'll now see that if I need to clip that content, it now updates and just shows me this. Probably not the best example. So what I would probably do is undo this, is use a slice. So in the top menu here, you've got frame and you've got slice. So if I just add a slice here, I can then export this. You see there's a layer here, export, and it will just export that thing that I've selected. So adding that slice might be what you want. There's another question. Something about toggling functionality. I'm not sure I understand that one, so it might be worth me just jumping on to the next one. Question here, is there a way to export slides in a single PDF? Yeah, so in the top menu with the Figma icon, go to Figma File, you can export frames to PDF. So that will then export everything on the canvas as a PDF. The PDF is probably going to be quite heavy in weight, so I'd always encourage you just to share the file with somebody if you can. Where can you find all the plugins? So go to figma.com/community here. I'm going to put this in the chat. And you should be able to find all the plugins, all the sample files that you can get from there. I might actually just show you figma.com/community. So here you've got plugins, widgets, all these tabs at the top to jumpstart you. If you want to find plugins, you can click that one. If you want a UI kit, there's an option at the top right for UI kits. You can go and find all these. Most of them are free to use. So there's a free wireframes kit here, for example. You can click this. If you click get a copy, that'll just duplicate that straight to your drafts. You can go and use it and have fun with it straight away. You can see here some examples and some components there as well. Cool. All right, I think that's the end of the questions and probably the end of our time. I hope this was useful, everybody. Of course, if you have any further questions, just, you know where to find me.
Okay, so I guess we don't have any other questions. If you have, you can still, we still have time if you want to ask any questions. We have a question. Someone is asking in the chats, any recommended UI kits?
Yes, I would probably recommend you check out the, I'm just finding it here. I would encourage you to go to the material design Figma account, and they've got a material 3 design kit in there that you can go and use. There's over 100,000 duplications, so it's pretty popular. All right. Oh, good question. Is it really necessary to make a design system? How long do you have? Arguably for a small project, no. If you're working on a large company with multiple products and many designers, many developers, yes. So I'll place yourself along that line to define whether you need one or not. But for a small Hack Week project, probably don't need one. Okay, folks, I'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's conclude the workshop. Thank you so much, Louis, for being here and presenting this amazing session. It was a really great, wonderful learning experience for all of us. Thank you so much.
No problem. See you later.
See you later. And so let's conclude the workshop. Thank you everyone for attending this workshop. We hope everyone enjoyed and really look forward for seeing you in the next event as well. We are sharing the feedback form. So please make sure that you fill in the feedback form, which also contains your details so that we can get your certificates generated in few days. And register in the hackathon if you have not done yet. And also join the Discord server because it's really mandatory to get your more information about the further events as well. And stay connected with our social media to stay updated. So that's it. Let's end the workshop. Thank you, everyone.